Hi, my name is Samantha Waltersdorf, and I did my analysis of interpersonal communication on the movie As Good as It Gets. So I'm going to go ahead and explain what I found as far as communication in the movie. So the objective of the movie is to evaluate the movie As Good as It Gets. The movie follows a single mother and waitress and a misanthropic author and a gay artist who form a unlikely friendship throughout the movie. The main characters of the movie are Carol, Melvin, Simon, and Verdell, the dog. I forgot to put Simon's actor's name right there, so that is why that looks like that. I will change that when I submit this. Throughout the movie, the main characters interact with each other in a manner that shows many different communication styles, such as verbal, nonverbal, emotional messages, and there's definitely a lot of conflict. I think the whole movie is pretty much based on conflict. There are different elements of communication that are used throughout the film, and the three that I thought stood out the most were element number one, sender. Melvin sends out both verbal and nonverbal communication that agitates everyone. Carol sends out verbal and nonverbal communication that lets Melvin know that he is being both an insensitive and unreasonable human. Simon sends out both verbal and a lot of nonverbal communication that shows his vulnerability throughout the film. So I thought those were all good examples of sender elements. Element number two, receiver. All characters in the movie are really receivers of communication. Melvin receives the most negative communication from Carol and Simon, and Simon Verdell received the most negative communication from Melvin until the end of the film, where the receiving communication becomes mostly positive. Simon gets almost all positive communication from Carol. Carol receives both negative and positive communication from Melvin, whereas she receives only positive from Simon. Element number three, feedback. I thought that was a very important element that was shown throughout the film. There's a ton of feedback, nonverbal, including Melvin's inability to overcome his discomfort in a lot of situations. He tends to not have any eye contact, and he covers his face a lot during times of discomfort. There's a lot of raising eyebrows, glares, and stares from people reacting to Melvin's behavior throughout the film. All right, so culture and perception of self. So culture, I feel like Carol comes from a pretty blue-collar family, or so it seems. She works very hard for what little she has. She's single. She has to balance taking care of her child and putting food on the table. She's pretty much liked by everyone she comes across, and she struggles, but at least she knows how to act in social situations. Whereas Melvin kind of thinks he's like a hierarchy. He really doesn't see that anything he does is wrong. Yeah, he kind of sees himself as kind of higher on the spectrum. He's pretty wealthy and he's a pretty successful author, but really that doesn't do much for his self-worth. And I feel like there's a culture connection between Carol. She really cares about her family. Her mom lives with her. And I feel like that's traditionally a thing with Hmong people. They very much value family. And they kind of feel like the more family you have, the better. The more people that you live with, you know, the wealthier you are in that aspect. And I feel like that's kind of connects with Carol's family perception. Again, she sees herself, she's a very self-isolated person, and Melvin is also, but he enjoys that, and Carol, you can tell, does not really enjoy that about herself. So I thought that was interesting. Listening. So the reoccurring theme is the solid fact that Melvin is just a really crappy listener. Like, he interrupts people, he doesn't care. He just really doesn't know how to communicate I mean, he's socially awkward, and I feel like that goes hand in hand with poor listening. He just really doesn't, signals people give out, he just does not comprehend them, and he really doesn't have a filter. He just kind of blurts out stuff. And he has a lot of like inconsistent body language. He really can never sit still. And like I mentioned before, he can never make eye contact. And that's a big problem when having a personal conversation with someone. It's a big part in having a personal conversation with someone, I feel like, especially when you have like an interview or something crazy like that. Verbal and nonverbal communication. They play a very large part in this movie as well. Carol expresses a lot of nonverbal cues when she reacts to Melvin's comments. She also verbally expresses that there will be consequences to his actions, like him getting kicked out of the diner or, her not waiting on him anymore at the diner. Melvin's actions and facial expressions are all nonverbal cues on how he's feeling. He's always got some kind of smirk on his face, or he always is rolling his eyes. He just always looks very, very annoyed. And I do have some examples, some video clips here from some scenes. Hopefully they play. If they don't, I will send you the PowerPoint and you can watch the scenes. And yeah, I don't think they're going to work, but they do work if this was a normal PowerPoint and not using the recorder. So the first one I did was Frank yelling at Melvin. He pretty much verbally and physically assaults him in the hallway, like drags him out of his apartment and starts yelling at him. And Melvin starts saying like, "Oh, you're black, you're assaulting me," and those are trigger words, and just really poor uses of verbal communication. I feel like obviously he's just making an assumption that he's going to beat him up because he's black, and so he starts yelling for the police and all that crazy stuff. The second scene I did is when Carol and Simon and Melvin are all driving to Baltimore, and Simon is trying to tell Carol about his life and kind of, why he is on this trip and how he kind of is where he is in life. And Melvin's in the back seat and he's just like so annoyed and thinks that Simon's just this big crybaby. And so he says like, "Oh, well, everyone goes through stuff," but he really just doesn't care. And Carol is obviously trying to be like the mother she is and be very attentive to Simon and listen to him. And she always shows, well, not always, but in this scene, she shows really great listening skills. And obviously Melvin does not. I really don't know what the clips aren't working. And again, I apologize for that. So I'm hoping when I send the link, you will be able to watch them. If not, please let me know. All right. Example number 3. I feel like the biggest one is when Carol and Melvin are in Baltimore and they're sitting in the restaurant and, Melvin just kind of says like, "Oh, I had to go buy a whole new outfit and they let you in a house dress." And at that point, Carol is just like done. She gets up to leave and, Melvin's like, "No, wait, please come back. Please don't cause a scene." And she's like, "Give me a compliment." And he does. He says like, "You make me want to be a better person." And that's, the first really sincere thing he has said throughout the whole movie to her. And, she takes this and you can tell at that point their attraction level is kind of grown, and she is trying to get him to look at her and she's moving in like she wants to kiss him, and he is just looking all over the place trying to avoid it like the plague. And it is just, then he blurts out that he wants her to like sleep with Simon, to like turn him straight or something stupid, and then she just is like, "Nope," and walks out. So I thought that was a really good example of verbal and nonverbal, because she is like giving all of this like to him and trying to like get him to engage in her, and he is just either too nervous or he just really sucks that bad. All right, emotional and conversational. Melvin has anger issues. It's pretty apparent. He pretty much hates everyone. He doesn't care. He doesn't know how to convey emotions or understand them. He struggles dealing with Carol, but he does show some emotion. He obviously cares. And then also, when he has to give Verdell the dog back to Simon after he's been taking care of him, he becomes very vulnerable and starts to show physical emotions like crying because he has, started this bond with this little dog who he hasn't had that before. He's always shut people out. So the bond is special, and it's a cute dog, so that makes sense. Interpersonal relationships, development of relationship happens between Melvin and Simon throughout the movie. I mean, they are not friends, and the best RDT example of that would be development of relationship. They teeter on the line of hating each other, but like caring about each other, and that shows itself throughout the movie. And even at the end, when they do establish somewhat of a friendship, it's still it's awkward. Attraction is the RDT example for Carol and Melvin. They, again, are very self-isolated. Carol is afraid of failure of relationships, so she is just she doesn't really want to start something, but you can tell there is an attraction there. Interpersonal conflict and management. Conflict is definitely the subject matter of the movie. Conflict is displayed throughout the entire film. I mean, they try to manage it by working out their not hatred, but their dislike for each other. And Melvin just doesn't really understand Simon because he's gay, and I think that makes Melvin feel a little threatened and kind of uncomfortable. And so he really tries to, though, rationalize the conflict throughout the movie, and you can tell that they all kind of give each other a second chance against their better judgment. Interpersonal power. Carol uses referent power. She's pretty, she's charismatic, she has Melvin on his toes the whole movie, and he's obviously attracted to her. Melvin uses information or persuasion power. He kind of tries to sell himself to Carol and say, I'm going to make all these changes because you make me want to be better. Verdell, referent power. Not much to say there. He's a cute dog. I mean, he obviously gets Melvin's heart and gets Melvin to come out of his shell. Simon, expert power and referent power. He's charismatic and he knows what he's doing as an artist, but unfortunately we see that power decline when he does end up going bankrupt and losing most of his money, if not all, and becoming homeless. But, thanks to Melvin, he does not end up homeless. Personal evaluation. I chose this movie because I think it has so many different types of elements of communication, and I just knew it would kind of be perfect for analyzing communication in this class. It's very interesting to me because Melvin is OCD, and he just shows so many different signs of it's just like a psychological thing, but it's also a very it's just interesting. I guess I'm tripping on my words here, but it was very interesting to watch. I had never seen this movie before. So, there's definitely disconnects between everyone. Everything that happens in the movie are great examples of poor communication and how communication can be improved and actually become something really great and special, and how sometimes not all relationships are organic. Sometimes there is work that needs to be done, obviously. And I feel like that's kind of a stage in every romantic and friendship type of relationship. And what I got from this movie is if you self-isolate, you're going to end up with really terrible social skills, and therefore there will be really terrible communication. Branching out and going outside of your comfort zone is something that is necessary, I think, if you want to build new bonds in your life, and this is a really great example of that. Melvin did not want to go outside his comfort zone, but he did it, and he ended up getting the girl. So that is my spiel on interpersonal communication, and then the last page is just my reference page. And yeah, so that is a wrap on that. Thank you.